an epiphany after taking care of 3 gentlemen all in a row in a couple months, all less than 40, all who came in with sudden cardiac death and heart attacks, one of whom was a friend of mine. And at the time, I had, 3 young kids, working crazy hours, overweight, developed hypertension, high cholesterol, coming home, falling asleep, kids can't play with the kids. And after this happened, I came home and I said, if I don't do something differently, that's gonna be me. And I don't wanna leave you guys behind. And so I did what, I think any of us would do. I went to my doctor with a friend of mine and I said, hey man, I really wanna find out what's going on. I really wanna take a deep dive. And he kind of said, we did some lab work. Eat less, work out more. And I'm like, really, that's it? He's like, yeah, what do you want from me? I'm like, no, I want a plan. He's like, yeah, we really don't know what to tell you. And so that led me down the rabbit hole of really starting to look at nutrition and fitness and all of the things we do in medicine that turn out to be really are not what we probably should be doing. Started going to conferences, and within a very short period of time, my wife and I got ourselves kind of fixed all our chronic problems, started feeling good, and we were doing CrossFit and all kinds of stuff. And Steve Pinkerton, who owns the CrossFit we were at, said every class I'd be after like an hour, people ask me questions. He's like, Doc, you should start a clinic. And so 15 years ago, we opened a little clinic in one room in a CrossFit box, and grown over the years, and we have a state-of-the-art facility just north of Charlotte. And we focus on precision and functional medicine and optimizing health and predicting things early. So that's kind of my background. I'll see if I can get my slideshow to go. So look, it says to win big, sometimes you need to take big risks. Unfortunately, Bill is wrong. Taking big risks in our health is not the way to do it. And what are the big risks? Well, if we look at what the big risks are for our own personal health, the number one thing is cardiovascular disease. Number 2 is cancer. And really, number 3 is metabolic disease, both diabetes type 1 and type 2 and type 3 diabetes, which is dementia and Alzheimer's. So that's 3 and 4. And then, trauma, other things come into that. But the fact of the matter is that those are the areas that we know most of us are going to die from, most of our loved ones are going to die for. And those are the areas we really should be looking at if we want to maximize longevity and health and everything else. And unfortunately, the way we practice medicine these days is a little bit like teaching your kid to drive by looking at the hood ornament in the car. If we look at the hood ornament of the car, when do we know that we hit the tree? We know we hit the tree after we've kind of crashed into the tree. And the numbers are pretty sobering. We treat these problems as they arrive. And so these, 360,000 people a year die of sudden cardiac death, meaning that they're fine 1 minute and they just drop dead. If you don't hit that person with electricity or something, within a few minutes they're dead. And we see this all the time in the emergency department. 50% of those people, that sudden cardiac death was the first symptom they ever had that they had heart disease. They had no idea. 50% of heart attacks are fatal. So it's a huge number. There's 1.1 million heart attacks in the US every year, and half of those are fatal. 1.9 million is the number of new cancer cases every year in the US. 50% of those cancers are discovered at a late stage because we don't have any screening for the majority of cancers. We find out when they start causing symptoms, and at that point, they're advanced and they're hard to treat. We only routinely screen for 5 types of cancers: breast, cervical, colon, prostate. If you're a smoker, we might do a yearly CT scan to screen for one.
What about skin? We don't do skin.
Skin, but it's not a routine. Everybody should have their skin checked, but oftentimes it's hard to find out. 14% number of Americans that carry a gene called ApoE4. We have 2 copies of that gene. And your risk, if you have that gene or you don't have that gene, of developing Alzheimer's in your lifetime is variable. If you have 2 ApoE3s, which are the normal forms, your risk is 30%. If you have 1 ApoE4 and 1 ApoE3, your risk goes to 50%. And if you have two ApoE4s, your risk is 70%. And Alzheimer's and dementia is one of the fastest growing problems out there. We think that there's going to be 16 million cases worldwide by 2050. And so those are big numbers. Now, we talked about our little car and how we practice medicine today, and crash into the tree, and then we have to pick up the pieces. That's not what we do. We tell our kids, hey, quarter mile down the road, and if there's a tree in front of you, don't hit it. That's what we should be doing. But the average person sees their primary care doctor for 5 minutes a year if they're healthy. And they do a really basic set of labs and they say you're fine. And what they're set up to do is treat problems. Oh, when you have diabetes, it will deal with it. When you develop cancer, we'll deal with it. Well, we take a little different perspective in terms of that. And I really think there's 5 questions that you should have absolute answers for. And there are absolute answers available for all these 5 questions. The number 1 is, do I have heart disease? Now, has anybody ever asked their doctor that question? No. So what we do is we treat most things as a population. So we say, okay, you've got men over 50, they're a little higher risk of heart disease. We're going to do maybe some more lab work. Maybe if they have certain problems, maybe we'll do a stress test. And we'll sort of, take a little closer look at those people, but we're going to wait until you start having chest pain when you're walking, or you have a heart attack or a stroke. Remember, when I say heart disease, heart attacks and strokes are basically the same thing. It's just heart disease in the brain. So if you have heart disease, you know you have brain disease. The fact of the matter is there are some very good tests that we can absolutely tell people, yes or no, you have heart disease. One of them is a very simple cardiac CT scan that looks for calcium in the arteries. You only get calcium if you have plaque. If you have plaque, you have heart disease. If you have heart disease, you need to do something to prevent it. And so we can look at genetics as well. We can look at family history. In our clinic, we do very advanced lab work to really stratify people. We can get carotid ultrasounds to see if there's any plaque in the carotids. And we can absolutely tell people yes or no, you have disease. So I have a couple that are in my clinic the last 2 days that flew in from Alabama that are getting a big evaluation. They're both orthodontists. The husband, young, healthy, fit guy, we did his CAT scan, he's got an elevated calcium score. He's at high risk of heart disease. Now, because we know that, we can do a number of things based on his labs to absolutely bring his risk of rupturing that plaque and causing a heart attack or a stroke down to 0. But we have to actively manage it, and we have to be aggressive about it. And part of that's going to be about changing his lifestyle as well. Yes.
Just wanted to make a comment that Jenny and I feel very fortunate. We go to a doctor in our community who asked us about our history of heart disease. So we both recently just had calcium tests at his recommendation.
And reassuring, right?
Reassuring. Mine was at 3%. So it's very reassuring.
And so you feel better about it. We're not asking those questions. Those 3 guys I took care of all would have been preventable had we discovered it early. And we don't do that in medicine. Secondly, do I have cancer? We can do our screening and do our 5 things. Suppose I've got pancreatic cancer, or I've got biliary cancer, or a head and neck cancer. Anybody know anybody's had pancreatic cancer?
Yes.
How'd they fare?
Right. Good.
Because pancreatic cancer typically presents in an advanced stage and you can't detect it. You know what the survival rate of pancreatic cancer is if you pick it up in stage 1? It's about 85%. So where do you want to find it out, right? Well, there's actually some testing we can do preemptively to determine these things. We do what's called liquid biopsy, which is basically a cell-free DNA test. When cells divide, some of the DNA sneaks out of them, and we can detect those DNA patterns. We know what tissues they're coming from. And cancer cells have a particular methylation pattern that we can pick up. And we can do a liquid biopsy and screen for 50 types of cancers and pick them up either very early, but more importantly, it's a very specific test. And there's a difference between specificity and sensitivity. And basically, specificity means If you get a negative result, it's really negative. And it's 99% specific. So that means if we do that test and it's negative, we know to 99% certainty that you do not have any of those cancers. The only ones we can't screen for is brain, because the blood-brain barrier keeps that DNA from passing into the general circulation. It's not that sensitive, so you might, for example, colon is about 40%. So if you had a positive result, it's only about 40% chance you really have cancer. But then we would know, oh, we need to look. Let's do a CT, and we can pick these things up very early when they're treatable.
Do the insurance companies typically cover those costs?
Of course. That test is about $1,000 or so, but talk about reassurance of your CAT scan. The couple that's here from out of town, their scans are negative, and they got a big family history of cancer and things like that. Definitely, we want people doing their routine screening, but we just don't screen for much. Certainly changing lifestyle can significantly reduce that. The next question is, do I have metabolic disease? When I talk about metabolic disease, that's simply insulin resistance, diabetes, pre-diabetes. You know, you go to your doctor, they do a hemoglobin A1C or something like that, maybe if they're suspicious. And they say, oh, you know, it's a little high, pre-diabetic, let's do these things. Well, we can actually, by doing more advanced lab work, can predict diabetes 5-6 years in advance, when it's so simple to fix. You just make a little move of the steering wheel. But doctors aren't trained to do it. They don't know what to look for. They don't order the correct labs. We can look at genetics. We can look at family history. We use continuous glucose monitors in our clinic. We put a monitor on people and we tell them, don't do anything, just wear it for a week. And we'll come back in and we'll look at those numbers and say, oh, look what your blood sugar is. Let's make some nutritional changes and let's work for another week and come back and we'll see the first week. And we do this with a couple that came in. We didn't tell them anything, we just had to put it on in Alabama or Arkansas, where we're from. And they wore it for a week. And now they've been with us, and part of our big evaluation, we actually cook for them and we teach them how to cook. And their blood sugar for the last 7 days has been like this. And they hit our doors yesterday and it was, and they're like, oh my gosh. And those simple things, lifestyle. We're always looking at nutrition, fitness, sleep, stress, and hormones are kind of our go-to thing. Epigenetics, we've talked about, that's gene expression, and we can look at epigenetics, and we can see what's going on, and we can make changes and then follow up and check and see if we've actually made the changes we expected. What's my personal risk for Alzheimer's? You need to know what your ApoE status is. If your ApoE 4.4 and you have 70% risk, you probably want to know that, because it's absolutely preventable. It's preventable by avoiding all these other things. But you need to know that answer. You need to know for your kids.
Question is, you said it was the third diabetes. Is that because there's a high correlation between sugar consumption and carbohydrate consumption
And inflammation.
and inflammation?
Yeah, so we take a very, very close look at, we look at genetic testing there. Besides ApoE, there's a gene called TOM40, there's a gene called Klotho. So we do a full genetic evaluation, and if we can identify those things, and our genetic testing also says, hey, this person has this pattern, and here are all the scientific studies that show these medications or these supplements are very beneficial in this population. So we can, again, we're a precision medicine clinic. I don't take care of populations. I don't take care of a 40-year-old female. I take care of Choice, or I take care of Rebecca. Individually, we look at every single person and we make our plans based on the individual. Who cares what the statistics say? I know whether or not you have heart disease. If you have heart disease, we've got to deal with it. Even if you're an outlier, you shouldn't have heart disease. If you have it, we've got to deal with it. Special MRIs, we do a total cognoscopy, which is looking at all these different variables. We have a very good success rate reversing Alzheimer's and dementia. There's a guy named Dilworth who wrote a book called The End of Alzheimer's, and he published multiple studies. Alzheimer's is absolutely reversible if it's found early. We have multiple people that come back to normal. There's typically 5 types of Alzheimer's and dementia. One is inflammatory, which is related to insulin resistance and metabolic problems. Secondarily is trophic, which is related to hormones. So when people's hormones start going down, the brain starts losing, estrogen, potent protector of the brain against dementia, the heart against cardiovascular disease, the bone against osteoporosis. When do women develop their heart disease? Postmenopausal, menopause, estrogen. The other ones are toxic, so people can get exposed to chemicals, heavy metals, things like that. Mold, things of that nature. The next one is related to trauma, so prior traumatic brain injury. And the last one is infections, things like tick-borne illnesses, chronic viral infections, Lyme disease, things like that we're seeing with post-COVID now as well. And so you have to look at all those things, figure out where they are, and address the underlying cause, which is the heart of functional medicine.
So Alzheimer's is not genetic.
It is a genetic risk. So we have plenty of patients in our clinic that are in their 70s that are ApoE44. They don't have dementia because we're doing everything that we need to do to prevent it. So it's potential. If you let yourself get overweight, if you let yourself get insulin resistant, if you let your blood pressure be out of control, then you're going to be in that 70%. If you do all the things to avoid that and reverse it, you won't be. And so that's the key thing. But do you know? Your doctor should be able to tell you that. Lastly, how quickly am I aging? And how do I slow it down? And so epigenetics is a great way of us looking at how we can look at these epigenetic clocks and we can say to people when we do that testing, hey, you're 50 years old, but genetically and biologically, you're 65. Okay, what do I need to do about that? Okay, we're gonna implement all these things. 6 months later, we come back and repeat the testing, and now we're 42 biologically. There's a thing called glycan testing, which are little sugar moieties that are bound to proteins, and it's a very advanced therapy. It lets us predict disease very early. It also lets us design personalized treatment protocols for those things. And we do a lot of kind of really bleeding edge things. Nootropics are like brain stimulating drugs. We look at senolytics, which are anti-aging drugs, things like rapamycin, metformin, and things that are really on the kind of the cutting edge. But you can find out how quickly you're aging and then implement things and then measure. You've got to keep measuring. You can't just, if it's not measurable, it's not real. And again, your primary care doctors probably know nothing about this. There's another way of looking at direct cellular senescence, and we talked about, sort of at NC State, we're working with I'm an investigator in a study looking at some cellular senescent testing through NC State, and we're running some of our patients through that protocol to see if we can use that as an age marker. So those are the 5 things that if you don't know that with certainty, not just maybe, but with certainty, you're really doing yourself a disservice. My job is to build vibrant, happy, healthy 90-year-olds. And we build those from, a lot of times, from unhealthy, 50, 60, and 70-year-olds. But we've got to deal with, the underlying cause. I always tell people, you can't make it easy because you got to do the work, right? But we can make it simple. We can make it pretty simple. These are the things, and we do that by doing these big evaluations, measuring everything, finding out where the areas we have to concentrate on, and focus on those areas and reverse them. And we have very high success rates. But there are some strategies that you don't need me for that are just everyday things. And those are things like nutrition. Good nutrition is important. We eat a lot of junk, a lot of processed foods, a lot of chemicals. We take care of 90-year-olds in the emergency department all the time, and almost invariably, they look like they're 60, and they come in because they twisted their ankle hard. And if you ask them, they eat food from their gardens, they've been active their entire lives. Clearly, they're not eating highly processed foods all the time. And so nutrition plays a very big role. I think one of my jobs is to try to cut through some of, there's so many YouTube videos and TikToks about do this and do that. And almost invariably, the guy who's, pushing intermittent fasting is selling intermittent fasting products. And the guy who's pushing this is selling that. There's always some angle. And we try to look at the science and cut through it and say, hey, this is what will work for you. And it's, what works for you may not work for you, and vice versa. So we have these tools to be able to figure out what might work. Exercise, movement is so vitally important. One of the things that we do with all of our patients is a DEXA scan. I mean, probably some of you had DEXA scans for bone density, but more importantly, we use them for body composition. We can tell you exactly how much body fat percentage you have, how much muscle you have, I'm a stickler about muscle mass because if you take 7-year-olds and you take the group of 7-year-olds that have muscle mass that is at the 70th percentile or higher, and you compare them to the same age group that have muscle mass at 20% or lower, you know what the difference in longevity is? 450%. If those two groups one of them stops smoking, you know what the improvement in longevity is? 50%. If you look at their VO2 max, their aerobic function, same thing, it's a 350% difference. So exercise is the cheapest and best anti-aging medicine that's out there. And movement, you don't have to be doing CrossFit, you don't have to be lifting, but you've got to be moving every day. It's really important. Lastly, sleep. Sleep is vitally important. And we have so many sleep disruptors, so many distractions. Getting enough sleep is vitally important. We use all kinds of wearables, all types of different things, supplements that help. We look at their genetics, help us decide what things might work for sleep. Good sleep is vitally important, and none of us probably get enough of it. There are some things like stress that are multifactorial, how we deal with stress, mindfulness, gratitude. There's a whole range of things that we use to try to deal with stress. Sometimes it's just acceptance of like my major stressors I don't have any control over, or I'm really stressed out by my job, but I'm not leaving my job. So we do a thing called a quality of life inventory that goes through a list of 15 things in your life, and it asks 2 simple questions. How important is this to you, and are you satisfied or dissatisfied? It gives us a nice little graph, and we'll get a little, there'll be things on the left that are dissatisfiers and things that are right that are satisfiers. And oftentimes we can look at that and say, work is a major dissatisfier, and it's dragged your entire quality of life down, but we can't affect that. But play is low, community is low, your exercise is low. If we move all of those 3 things that we have control over up, we can compensate for this when we don't have control over. And so we really look at mindfulness and we try to really goal set with our patients and try to really drive them to be healthy and to deal with stress in a healthy manner. There's some that I think do require adoption. We know there's a huge association with aging and hormones, and so we really look to optimize hormones. Hormones really drop precipitously as we get into our 40s and 50s. Estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, melatonin, all these things. And we know there's significant improvements in longevity in folks that have adequate levels of hormones versus inadequate, again, combined with all these other things. I'm always trying to give people certainty, clarity, and direction. Certainty for us in my clinic is doing all this testing. We know, do you have heart disease? Do you have the risk for Alzheimer's? Do we have early metabolic disease? Clarity is sort of sitting down with me and explaining, this is what this means. And direction is what we do better. And I think that everybody has to sort of take, especially in this day and age, with the corporatization of medicine, atrium's not interested in really being healthy, right? They're interested in making money and picking, and so you have to be your own advocate for health. And a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of people don't know how to do that. So you really need to find somebody that understands this. And unfortunately, there's a lot of great physicians in the system, but they're handcuffed. They're not allowed to do this. One of the largest, we have a pretty specialized clinic, but one of our largest populations is physicians. So we have a huge number of physicians, dentists that come to us, and because they know the right thing to do. And then I've got cardiologists that aren't allowed to talk about the nutrition we're talking about. We know it fixes the risk for heart disease, but they're not allowed to share that with patients, which is insane, right? Synergy gets this idea of, you don't make big changes by making a big change in one area. You make big changes by making lots of small changes across all those areas we talked about. Business and personal performance are linked, and so if you perform better, internally you're going to do better personally and business-wise. And the big thing is, where do you want to be? Our goal is to get our patients to the far right developer, performing at their best. We work with a lot of executives, CEOs, people flying from all over the country to see us. If I can give a high-powered executive 10% more performance, my next word out of my mouth is I don't want you to put it into your business, I want you to put it into the areas that are important, your family, your faith, whatever else. Let's get you the bandwidth to do better with all the other things. It's not all about work, it's about being healthy. We kind of have control over our destiny, and I think that is important to understand. You guys all have control, you just have to sort of demand that. And again, your doctor may not be in the position to help you, but there are other people out there that probably can. And I think that if we can control those 5 areas, then, I can't help if a piano falls and hits you in the head, but we can really reduce significantly the risk of all these other things that are going to, the major killers of all of us. And so that's kind of what I become passionate about. That's what we've done in my place for the last 15 years or so.
What's your biological range?
My biologic age, I'm 57, and last time I checked it was 42. So,
Excellent.
I'd like to get it better, but we check it about every 6 months. Any questions?
Does insurance cover any of that work you do?
It doesn't, and for a lot of our patients, the other thing is like, do you want all your information in the system? If I find out that you have heart disease that nobody knew about, if you go to Atrium and they find it out, it's in your chart. And when you go to get insurance, you're gonna find out about it. You want your insurance company, you want your genetics. So everything we do is owned by our patients. So if an insurance company comes and says, hey, we want Choice's genetics, I said, that's awesome, you should definitely ask her about that. I don't know if she has genetics or not. So, we have a lot of patients that are really concerned about privacy, and so we're very privacy centric.
Well, if you had somebody concerned,
Now, you can use like a health savings account, things like that.
if you had someone concerned about heart disease or Alzheimer's, for instance. A lot of people-
Your doctor's capable of doing these things. The question is whether they will, and whether the system will let them, or whether the insurers will let them.
If they didn't, would you do it?
We do, yeah, absolutely. We do it with everything. Yes.
Okay, I think I'm following up on that question with the a la carte situation. Mentioned a certain name, I'm with them, and my annual physical is 30 minutes. Usually we're talking about scuba diving and parachuting, but
Right.
and that's fine because he's allowed me to be recertified in 40. But if there's an issue that I know is going to take probably much more in depth than what Al can give me or is allowed to give me, and we come to y'all for a la carte services.
I play nice with those.
Okay, because I'm looking like sleep. Over again.
And there's a lot of good information out there about sleep. Like, the first step for sleep is sleep hygiene. That's before anything else. That means no distractions in the bedroom. Don't turn the TV on. If you watch TV when you're in bed, your brain says it's time to watch TV. Get rid of that. Get rid of the lights, all the little blinky lights. Get rid of all those. Make sure it's cool. Make sure it's either quiet or get some white noise. That's the number one thing before we talk about any kind of supplements, medications, or anything. Get your sleep hygiene right, and you'll be surprised at how much. If you fall asleep with the television on, your brain is processing all that in the background. That's why, like, sometimes you'll incorporate that television show into your dreams. Like, you're never getting into the deep sleep. We like to track. I have a Whoop, I got an Apple Watch, I get all kinds of different things. I like to know. We look at heart rate variability. We look at a lot of different results. There are some great supplements, magnesium L3 and 8, which is a form of magnesium. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. We use a lot of that. Good quality melatonin, not the junk you buy at CVS, but like a good micronized, high quality, sustained release melatonin from the extract. But the first step is sleep hygiene.
And I got the impression that the majority of what you do is not covered by the average insurance company.
It's not, again, we don't, like, for the most part, do you really want, like I said, people use health savings accounts and things like that. We don't bill insurance.
House savings.
like a lot of the house, HSA account.
You can set aside for yourself.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're
you can
talking
set
about-
aside
yeah,
and
yeah,
use
okay.
that. What we do is so far, like our lab work is so far beyond like what you just got and guarantee it. And the insurance company says, you don't need that. I'm like, only if you don't know what's going on. You know. So it's just a different, and like, what we do is not certainly for everybody, but at the same time, these things are all accessible to everyone. And the things that, are worth mentioning to your physician, even though they probably don't, a lot of them don't have any idea, because they're just, unfortunately, and I don't get down on primary care doctors because it's a horrible job. They're put under so much stress, they have to see 30 people a day, they have to supervise multiple PAs, they have to deal with insurance companies, and they're all burned out. They don't have any interest in reading, learning anything else, they just go home and just collapse. They have a very difficult job. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. But they just don't have the ability generally to do it. Yes.
Couple of questions. Could you put this, give us a copy of this presentation? Lee, could you recommend some books that are out there? You mentioned Bredesen's, there's another book, How Not to Die, some of these, Why We Sleep. Are there some books that you would recommend?
There's a book by Peter Tier called Outlive, and Peter has a very similar clinic to us.
Okay.
There's probably only a handful of clinics like mine in the whole country. But that book talks a lot about sort of these, more advanced cancer screening, cardiac things along that nature. There's a million different books. I have to think about some of the ones that I like. That Bredesen book is excellent.
Yeah, I've got a copy of that.
Yeah,
So.
we do that protocol. As a matter of fact, I discovered Dale Bredesen because one of my patients, who was a physician, read the book and was like, Jeff, this dude's reversing Alzheimer's, and the crazy thing is he's using your protocol. It's like everything they're doing, things you've been doing for 10 years. So I met Dale, subsequently got certified as a provider through his group. We had great success with Alzheimer's.
We can talk about this offline, but Rotary, our district, has a fund, that blue bucket right there collects money every week that goes to support cutting edge research on reversing Alzheimer's. So we spent millions on Alzheimer's research already over the last 10, 15 years.
If you look at the landscape of Alzheimer's drugs, there's a single one that works.
No, there's not. But to Ranjit's point, I think Rotary's effort in helping these smaller researchers in cutting edge techniques and things, they're not eligible to apply for NIH grants or anything like that, but we provided $1.4 million to 5 different research groups this year. Yeah, so it's pretty significant.
But for us to also put it into operation, get the message out on reversing it through Bredesen as well. So.
I think the analogy Bredesen uses, and this will explain why none of these drugs work, nor will they ever work, is that Alzheimer's is like a roof, 100 holes in it, right? And the rain's pouring down. And what we're doing with medicines is we're closing up 1 or 2 of those holes. And we can perfectly fill in 2 of those holes, but we're still getting something back. And it's really about nutrition, sleep, stress hormones, metabolic health. If you fix all those things, you throw a tarp over the whole roof and you stop it. And a lot of it is related to neuroinflammation. It's remarkable how. So we use a tool called AQ21. It's hard, there's not really a blood test for Alzheimer's. I've got a lady in Concord who came to us about 6 months ago. And AQ21 is something that you get to the family. It's 21 things, and they rate their loved one, okay? 21 is the worst, and anything above 10 is considered dementia, mild to, and when she started with us 6 months ago, the average number the family gave her was 19. We just did it every 6 months. We do it honestly with my husband every week, but we just did it again, and the family average is 11. So, she's not 100%. And she came to us a little bit far advanced, so the earlier you find it, the better. But there's a significant quality of life difference between 11 and 19. Your 19, you kind of have to keep an eye on them all the time. 11, maybe you don't want them like driving around by themselves, but they can go to the supermarket and do all the other stuff. So it works.
And to piggyback off of what he said, just an example, because this is what I found fascinating talking to him for the honor flight, how different his clinic works. Is I go to Atrium and I see a doctor at Atrium every year, and then I get the phone call that says, hey, you have high cholesterol. Have you thought about diet and exercise? And I'm like, great, I'll think about that. Like, it's like they're so overworked, so that it's like they're not even checking my height, my weight and it's like I barely eat red meat. Like, this is a genetic thing. Like, I have high cholesterol, and there's different things that maybe I could look into, but they're ready to give me medication for it, and it's like.
And also, like, if you have, so I have a guy that I saw last week who has been came in, his cholesterol moderately high, his doctors want him to be on cholesterol medicine. He doesn't want to. He did his whole evaluation, he's got a calcium score of 0, no evidence of heart disease. He hasn't developed heart disease in the last 50 whatever years, like with his cholesterol that's been that way his whole life. So does that guy need to be on cholesterol medicine? I would say no, he doesn't. The cardiologist, I love him, like people's cholesterol levels to be so low. Do you know what your brain is made of? Cholesterol. All these hormones are all made of cholesterol. So you can, there's a risk for developing dementia if your cholesterol is too low. So you gotta balance, everything. I mean, if males with heart disease absolutely be on statin, because statins lower C-reactive protein. It's a whole other. 70% of heart attacks and strokes are from open vessels that have plaque in the wall that are undetectable, not detectable by a stress test, by a cardiac cath, anything. And in my emergency medicine career, I've taken care of thousands of heart attacks, and I cannot tell you how many times someone comes in and I'm like, Mr. Jones, you're having a heart attack, and they say, I just had a stress test a month ago. There's no rupture plaque,
Okay, we've got time for maybe one more question.
Do you, I've had a lot of friends going through like infertility and they're just throwing drugs at it. Do you take those kind of patients where you figure out what's going on hormonally or something that might be contributing towards that?
I never really know how to answer this question without sounding like a creep, but we do have a lot of women get pregnant.
Yeah, that's creepy.
So polycystic ovarian and it's easily fixable. Right now we've got 1, 2, 3 women, all due in the next couple months. The kiddos with polycystic disease. They have been infertile for 9 years, 3 years, and 4 years, and they're all getting ready to deliver in the next couple months. That's fascinating.
Like, where is your clinic located?
We are in kind of by university, right off of 45 near like at the Hedrick Luxury Auto Mall up there. Right off of 45. 20
Speedway Boulevard, Speedway Boulevard.
A little bit west of that. Yeah, not too far from there.
Okay, Jeff, thank you so much. We have a gift for you and a job we'd like for you to